It's all started a long time ago. I'd rather not say how old I am, but we're talking about late 70s, I guess, when I got interested in. Well, I've been interested in messing about with sound and recording equipment probably since I was a young lad. But probably the sort of new wave thing, the punk thing, made it easier to actually get involved in things towards the end of the 70s. It was an era in Britain where there was a huge, well, not huge, but a reasonable do-it-yourself scene for cassettes. People would exchange tapes or sell tapes really cheaply or copy tapes. And it was kind of the first explosion of anybody can do anything, I think it's safe to say. So I did. I mean, I didn't have a lot of musical knowledge, talent, scope, equipment, but gradually just pieced things together and released various tapes, got to know a lot of people in the scene, and for some bizarre reason didn't stop doing it like a lot of people did. And well, here I am today. What's that, 20 odd years later? Some people never learn, do they? I'm not so sure if it's artists that want to play with technology. Most people seem quite keen to use it, new stuff when it comes out. Like every man and his dog's using a laptop now, which is something, for instance, I swore I would never do. Everybody's releasing, downloading MP3s or carrying MP3 machines around, which obviously could possibly cause the music business, whatever that is, some harm. But there'll always be the guys, the fat cats, who make their money out of music as an industry, who are shit scared of anybody who's going to do anything which might stop them making a buck, so to speak, albeit surreptitiously by, shall we say, illicit downloading or copying, like they were worried about with the tape scene, and then it was the CDR scene, and now it's MP3s. I mean, that's always going to be a problem, I guess. But they don't like people doing things their way. Like there's a very large underground music scene which exists independent of big business, and I think we do okay. Be nice to do a little better sometimes, but we don't need them. Perhaps they don't need us. I used to run a tape label when that was the only way you could really release things on a small scale, by copying tapes. And when I started to build my equipment up, got a small studio, I also bought a huge stack of tape machines, and I used to copy tapes really cheaply, and ended up copying tapes probably for most of the small labels in the country. And I got in touch, I think it was first got in touch with David from Current 93, who I think primarily got in touch with me because his parents used to live near York, the town I used to live in England. So he called in the studio and said, "Can you do these copies for me one day?" And I did them, and he realised I was probably sympathetic to his cause, shall we say. So I went on doing tapes for him, and he told Steve about it. So I did thousands and thousands of United Dairy tapes, which somebody must have made some money out of, I guess, somewhere. But after a while, I think they got a bit... They had a studio in London they could use, where the guy was sympathetic to what they were doing, but it wasn't always available, or I think maybe it closed down or something like that. So they decided to give me a try because they knew I probably would understand what they wanted. So they ended up coming up for a week, and I think it was Swastikas for Noddy, or can't remember. It's a long time ago. We did a Current 93 remix album where Current 93 had recorded an album and mixed it, but they didn't really like it, so we started again with the original master tapes and added to it. So yeah, I first started working with Steve and David on Current 93 stuff, and then I think the next thing may have been another Current 93 thing, but the closest thing to working with Nurse after that was the Sadness of Things album, which was a Steve Stapleton, David Tibet release, which I did. And then on to working with Steve a lot after that. Couldn't seem to get rid of him. But, you know, we seem to get on reasonably well. We haven't killed each other yet. And I don't always laugh when he says, "Can you do this?" Sometimes I laugh, sometimes I don't. I don't think I've ever actually refused to do anything. I mean, you know, over the years I was also running a commercial studio, which meant I did very conventional recording. So I was used to doing things the right way, you know, always doing things to sound like a normal record. But with him, all of that went out of the window, and I guess because of my interest in unusual music, it didn't bother me too much. But there were times I wouldn't. There've been so many ridiculous things I've been asked to do. I would never say, yes, this is the most ridiculous thing. But you know, the thing about working with somebody like Steve, who I think he wouldn't mind me saying, he doesn't profess to be a musician or an engineer. He doesn't particularly let the conventions of either music, technology or recording bother him in any way. He'll have an idea and he'll either do it or ask me to do it, and it's really good to work with people like that. A lot of the other people I work with are like that. A lot of the people I work with are devout non-musicians, and that can be technically frustrating sometimes if they're trying to play something musical and they haven't got the ability, although the results of that can sometimes be quite appealing. But the best thing about it is they ask to do things that other people don't, and you find different ways of working, and something which you might think is conventionally silly or a non-starter will prove to be very, very interesting. The number of things we've discovered by accident are just countless, and I think that's the best way to work. People like Darren Tate, for instance, who I've known for probably 15 to 20 years. I'm not very good with dates. Initially I worked with Darren and Andrew Chock, because they both lived in York, again the town where I used to live nearby, and I think they'd heard that there was a guy in a studio who wouldn't laugh when they asked if he could mic them up bowing a sheet of metal or something like that, or rattling, you know, bits of paper and things like that. So they used to come out to the studio, first Andrew, and then also Andrew and Darren, and they used to do a lot of stuff as the Aura project, which in those days was releasing stuff on tape. That was the only way to do it. But I gradually just sort of, it wasn't a case of joining the band, it's just I would suggest ways of doing things, I would suggest sounds and things like that, so I just ended up being part of the team, so to speak. And it was kind of movable feast. Sometimes it was just Darren and I, sometimes it would be Andrew and Darren, sometimes it would be Andrew and myself. Other people would contribute, like Lol Coxhill, Daisuke Suzuki, Jonathan Coleclough. You know, people would send in tapes or turn up for sessions and things like that. Jonathan Coleclough, there's another example. I've actually known Jonathan for over 25 years. Initially he just used to design covers for cassettes and things for me, but then he became more interested himself in music, and I've worked with him on countless projects over the year, and it's great to work with him. I still occasionally work with Andrew Chock, work with Darren as Monos, the duo Monos, which again is not necessarily a fixed band. You know, people come and go. On the last Monos album we drafted in Paul Bradley, who lives in the town that I live in now, which is called Preston, who helps me with a lot of stuff in the studio, and we've done a couple of albums. So I mean, initially it was just meant to be a small project to release my stuff and stuff by people like Jonathan and Andrew and Monos, but it's just growing a little bit, you know, and it's doing okay. Yeah, it's nice. There's a lot of interesting people around with. I mean, I get asked to work on lots of things. One of my ways of working tends to be to receive tapes, multi-tracks, or just bare tapes from people, and, you know, be asked to do something with it, which I think is a rare honour and a treat. If people said, you know, do what you like with that, and they're open-minded enough, which they seem to be in general, it's a great way of working. It's a bit scary because more and more people are asking me, and I never say no. Please don't quote me on that. I do say no now because I have so much work I can't really cope with it, and it's taken a long time to do things. I just did a thing with Andrew Mackenzie, a Hafler Trio mix, and I'm ashamed to say it took me about 18 months to do it, and some people have been waiting just as long, and it's embarrassing, but I get there in the end. Occasionally you do need the odd musician, and we know quite a lot of odd musicians, and the way an album like An Awkward Post worked was that Steve had a lot of recordings of Inflatable Sideshow from Ireland, where he'd, as far as I could imagine, I wasn't involved in those recordings, he'd asked them to play certain things or play things in a certain way, and given us, you know, he'd then fiddled with them a bit in the studio over there, and come away with bunches of CDRs with mixes of backing tracks and things like that, or just drum tracks, or whole finished tracks, but him feeling, right, we'll do something else with them. So basically we transfer those to the multi-track in my studio, and then either take stuff away or pile stuff on, or a combination of all 7 or something like that. Yeah, no, I'm not averse to using musicians. All I'm saying is some of the albums, probably a lot of it, what people might regard as, if such a thing exists, a classic Nurse with Wound album, which I guess would be something like Shipwreck Radio. There should have been a label on the bottom saying no musicians were used in the production of this recording. You know, in a situation like that, you can produce a work without any conventional musical input, shall we say, whereas a lot of the other albums we've done, we've had musicians, we've even tried to play things ourselves. I mean, I can, you know, busk my way around certain instruments in a not entirely appalling way, so yeah, we need them now and again. They're great, our musicians, yeah. what we did in Holland for Salt Marie Celeste was, it was basically not exactly an entire remix. That was a specific thing where we took the original master tapes, the original multi-track tapes, and did a quadraphonic mix. I say we, obviously I did it while Steve sat at the back of the hall drinking beer and eating crisps or something like that. But no, I mean he would say, you know, it wants to be like this, wants to be like that. But that was in a way that was relatively easy, apart from the fact that it was quadraphonic. That was a little odd, but very, very interesting in that we could move sounds round about in circles and things like that. And we had a video projection which kind of went with the film, with the piece of music. So that was one thing, you know. That was, Steve would never. He always insists that Nurse with Wound don't perform live, and despite posters in Portland recently, that is still the case. You know, just because he appears doing a DJ set or playing a slide whistle with Rap X or something like that, that's not a Nurse with Wound show. So that's one thing, and I've done sets where I've used Nurse with Wound material as the raw material that I use live and mixed it in a completely different way. Not a remix of an album, but a mixture. Like I've done a set based on the Shipwreck radio albums, which is using loads of the raw materials and source materials for that. And I did another thing in Portland recently, which was mixing old and new raw material from Nurse with Wound. And then I do my own stuff, solo stuff, such as I'll be doing tonight. I think that's pretty much all my own stuff. There might be a bit of Britney Spears in there, I don't know. And then I play with other people. I play with Paul Bradley quite often. I play with Jonathan Coleclough sometimes, and a few other people now and again. So different identities, but at the end of the day, it's always got my personal touch, for what it's worth. Steve rang me up and said he'd been asked to do this thing in Norway, which was it was a commission from a Norwegian arts organisation, an official organisation. I think the British Council might have been involved as well, and they'd asked Anna Hilda Nesset and Rob Young from The Wire to curate some sort of audio event, some sort of sound part of the festival. There were lots of other visual artists, painters, sculptors, performers, things like that, and we were doing the sound side of it, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, they knew Steve, and they knew this Anna Hilda Nesset herself, although she lives in London and works in London, is Norwegian herself, and she knew about this legend of some Portuguese sailors who were shipwrecked on the Norwegian coast in the 15th century, I think it was. God knows what they were doing there, but there you go. And they went onto these islands. They were shipwrecked onto these islands called the Lofoten Islands, which is off the northwest coast of Norway. And they had a huge impact on the community there, because they'd never seen people like that before, and they've become almost legendary in their influence. Even though it was many hundreds of years ago, the islands still have links with Portugal, and this is like the biggest story there ever was. So anyway, that's the basic legend, the basic story. And Anna thought, we'll have some musicians who've been shipwrecked on these islands, and they'll be they'll get into the local community and influence the local community and learn from the local community, and there'll be this like two-way traffic between them. And the idea was that the Shipwreck musicians, using the term musicians lightly, would interact by taking their sound sources from the local area, anything at all, as long as it was from the islands themselves, and then they would feed that back into the local community by radio broadcasts. So Steve roped me in for it, God bless him, and I'm glad he did, because I don't think he could have managed it himself. So we were transported there. It's not a remote island, I mean it's quite civilized and things like that. We were given a basic recording studio in an apartment and told to just get on with it and produce. Initially it was supposed to be an hour's worth of radio a week, but it went down to 3 15-minute broadcasts a week, and we were told that's it, do what the hell you like, and we did. I mean, we just went out with microphones and portable data machines, recorded loads of noises of the area, made noises with various things in the harbour. We recorded ships, boats, lots and lots of people talking, because the Norwegian accent is just nearly said bizarre. It's just very, very interesting, and there were some people we met up there who had beautiful voices, and anybody who's heard the album will be aware of the fact that we manipulated them quite a lot. But we did gather a huge amount of material, and because we had to produce these radio broadcasts regularly all the time, this went on for 2 months, we amassed quite a lot of material. I mean, sometimes when we couldn't meet deadlines, they allowed us to repeat them, or we would do the same thing but slightly different. We'd slow it down, speed it up, or filter it or whatever. But at the end of that there was a lot of material available, and it was just really fascinating to start with nothing. I mean, a lot of Nurse albums have been a bit like that. We've started with nothing, or Steve's had a couple of ideas and we've bounced them between us. But with this we really did start with nothing. But once we got going it was just great. It was just fantastic, because we used the laptop quite a lot, I must admit, we just found sound is just a fantastic commodity. You can do anything with sound, and once you get to know how to use various processors or processors, you can make sound do what you want it to, or you can let it speak for itself. It was superb. Really enjoyed it. So there's already a double album released of that stuff, and there's at least another 2 on the way. But given the amount of Nurse product that's come out recently, I think we'll wait a while before we put that out. Steve and I were working on an album using some source material from the German band Zoll, and we worked on some stuff and did it, and we just sort of reached a point where we weren't sure what to do with it. This is my take on it. I mean, Steve may quote me different, may say something different, but we thought, this is not finished, and I thought what would happen was we'd come back to it, but in the interim, Steve had the brilliant idea, I think, of just giving it to other people. Obviously 3 very different types of people, if you like. I would, although the 3 albums, I'm not quite sure what to say. They're not as, the Cyclope one is the most different, I would say. It's the most extreme, but the other 2 are not far off. I mean, they've done a lot of order changing, and they've added stuff and probably taken stuff away, but I think you've got 3 very different perspectives on it. and I think it's just a really great thing to do, you know. But that was as a result of reaching a certain point with something and wanting it to go somewhere else, but not being quite sure. We, you know, don't always know what we're doing. Yes, we do. The full catalogue that's disappeared of nurse stuff, college stuff, current stuff is vast. Just the nurse stuff alone is very, very big. It's looking slightly more hopeful than it did 3 or 4 months ago, in that more things have been found, more masters, and it's not so bad these days in terms of if something's been released on a CD, you can actually use that as a master if you're really desperate, if you don't have the original master tapes. So I'm not absolutely certain, but I don't think anything's been lost without trace. But there's been some very expensive losses in terms of vinyl masters, because obviously if they have to be done again, that's expensive. Printing masters, original artwork and things like that have been lost. But the worst thing is that, you know, basically most of the nurse catalogue is just not available anymore. I know there are plans for other labels to release stuff. There may be stuff re-released quicker than it would have been if things had gone, well, obviously quicker than it would have been if things had gone on as they were, but it'll eventually stabilise. I just hope that some people don't sort of lose interest and think, I can't be bothered, you know, you can't get this stuff, what's the point? I mean, there's a lot of new stuff coming out, but I know what tends to happen is people want to catch up on the old stuff as well, so one way or another the old stuff will eventually reappear, apart from anything that has been lost without trace. But I'm sure nothing's been lost without trace. I mean, I recently heard an album by Musique Concret called Bringing Up Baby, which has been remastered from vinyl, because the original tapes of that were lost, and it sounds pretty damn good to me. You know, you can even remaster from vinyl if that's your only choice. Obviously it's not ideal, but it can be done. So, you know, apart from the fact that some people make a lot of money on eBay selling stuff that isn't available for a while, eventually I think things will right themselves. But it's been a pretty depressing period. The past 3 or 4 years have been just the best ever, and this past year, 18 months, I've just had the best time ever. People buy things now, mainly in America, it has to be said, so thank you, America. But people buy things, people ask me to do gigs, people say nice things to me, and I don't think they're lying all the time. And it's just great because, as I say, I've been doing this for more years than I care to remember, over 25 years. And for a lot of that time, nobody gave a shit, basically, other than a few trusty people. But now things are slightly better. So thank you very much, everyone.